Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey. We're coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio. We're also being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We're here in the Heartland holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone.
Today we have Dr. Michael Ryce. He's been a friend of ours for a long time. We had our school up in Chicago, and he came to do workshops with us on healing and forgiveness. And he has a center out in Missouri called Heartland, which is a center in the Ozark Mountains. And he's also been traveling around quite a bit. Last time we had him on our show, and we talked a lot about his forgiveness work. And so we're very excited today to have him back. And we're going to be talking about the laws of living and some other things related to that.
So welcome, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Honored, delighted to be here.
So let's start off by talking about what are the laws of living, because I think we could definitely use some right now.
Well, it's interesting. You know, we live in a culture that has given us such a false understanding of so many things. In fact, if you read Vladimir Lenin, who's probably responsible for more deaths on planet Earth than any human being that's ever lived, and he says, if you want to destroy a culture, change the meaning of its words.
Oh, wow.
And you know, the reason, as I see it, why that's true, and it is true, is because for human beings, culture is transferred via language. And if you change the meaning of a word, then you can't really transfer the meaning of a culture because the meaning of the words has been changed. And the word law in our culture, we've been taught, means the rule of a superior. You know, in the terms of the world itself, there's somebody with a big gun, and if you break the law, they're going to come get you. And in terms of the higher realms or other realms, they say there's this guy with a big fiery place that if you break the rules, he's laid down. If you don't follow the rule of the superior, you're in trouble. And in the ancient Aramaic, which is the root language of at least 5 of the world's major religions, including the teachings of the man named Yeshua, popularly called Jesus, but they changed his name. They changed the word. It's not his name at all. In that language, the word law has nothing to do with the rule of a superior. We've been fooled. You know, people say, well, in fact, you know, give me a list of those laws. I want to read them. No, there is no list of laws. There are no rules to be followed. That's just a total, complete fraud. This distracted us from the truth. In the Aramaic, the word law relates to, you know, as far as humans go, our ability to live in relationship to the eternal forces of the universe that govern all things. And an easy way or a good metaphor for understanding that is if you think about flying an airplane. You know, humans did not start to fly airplanes when they learned to break the law of gravity. Humans learned to start to fly airplanes when they learned to harmonize with the law of gravity. And the only way that airplane stays up there is by being in harmony with the law of gravity. And if for 1 second they go out of harmony with that law, the plane crashes. Gravity is one of the eternal forces. Gravity doesn't have any investment in how you relate to it. You know, if you're in harmony with it, you fly. If you stand on the edge of a cliff and you violate the law of gravity, 2,000 feet down, bones break. There's not some great punisher that says, well, let me see. They're falling. Should I break bones at the bottom or not? Not the way it works. It's just law. It's the way the eternal forces operate. So in Aramaic, wherever you hear them speaking about law, they're talking about these eternal forces in which we live, move, and have our being. And if we are conscious of those forces, if we are in relationship with those forces, then life tends to go well. You know, the airplane flies. fall out of harmony for a moment, and it's not that there's any punishment that's going to get us for anything, but things start to crash, fall apart, lead to difficulty, diseases of the body, of the mind, of the emotions, of relationships and finances, because we violated, or pardon me, I shouldn't say violated because that implies rules, not rules, but rather we have fallen out of harmony with the way those forces operate, and we end up in difficulty. So we do a 16-day, well, actually a 17-day course, residential course, and we're thinking with this whole COVID thing that's going on that we maybe will do a Laws of Living online soon too. But we do an extended course where we present the tools for moving into harmony with those eternal forces, for coming into conscious relationship with them. And when people do that, everything changes. The course was actually originally called emotional maturity instruction, pardon me, and it was taught in the prison system, and we cut recidivism by over 95%. Once people understood how this energy system called life works, that was the end of their criminal activity. Criminal activity is a response to stress. And stress happens when we set ourselves up with goals that violate those laws and try to fight our way through this energy system.
That's fascinating. And so it kind of reminds me, Michael, of, when a lot of people want to manifest something and they think, oh, I'm not manifesting it. It's because it's not fair. Or the universe doesn't want me to have what I want. And somebody had described it's like, plugging in your radio. It's like the socket that you plug it into. If you know how to tap the energy, it doesn't care, as long as you know how to tap the energy. So it's this idea of neutrality, that the universe doesn't pick favorites. It's all about understanding how to work with the laws. Is that kind of how you describe it too?
Again, because so many people think of the word law as somebody's rules, it's how to work with those eternal forces. Exactly. You're right on track. That's it.
So would these laws of living be similar to what some people describe as the universal laws?
It would also fit in harmony with the idea of universal laws. And it's interesting that you, Kathryn, that you mentioned the word manifest. In Aramaic, the word manifest isn't the idea of, well, I'm going to pull something out of thin air and make it happen. The word manifest actually is the word obvious. And as creators, whatever is obvious to us is what expresses in our lives, what we manifest. So if it's obvious to me that, well, relationships just don't work, if that's what's obvious to me, until I remove the energies behind that understanding and belief of the world, then I'm going to manifest, I'm going to bring about relationships that are in conflict and traumatic. And one of the key tools that we teach, as we talked about the last time we did this show, was that of forgiveness. And we live in a culture where we're told that forgiveness is about how I'm going to let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me. But actually, forgiveness is the way that I go inside myself and remove the energetic patterns that make certain ways of experiencing the world obvious to me and therefore manifest in my life. If it's obvious that poverty is the rule of the world, then I'm going to experience and live in poverty. That's going to be my creative result. When I find the root energies in me with which I hold that to be true, and it's a totally, completely abundant universe, and there is an abundance of poverty for people to whom which that is obvious, to which that is manifest. Mm-hmm. And when I recognize that these are all energetic patterns in me that interact with the energetic forces of the universe, and I go inside myself and learn to remove, and we need to start to equate the word forgive with removal, not with letting somebody off the hook for what's happening in my life. And when I go in and remove those energies, then the instant I remove it, the whole universe reorganizes itself energetically around the new pattern, the new energy that's obvious to me, and I'll produce that result.
It's really interesting when you're talking about what the words mean in Aramaic, and my understanding is that Aramaic is what Jesus spoke during his lifetime. It sounds almost
Correct.
like it's a language based on understanding metaphysical principles. Would you say that that's accurate? Can you describe a little bit more about how Aramaic works?
Well, I would go to just a slightly different level than that, and I would say when I first heard the Aramaic, my background's electronics with a side study in physics, and when I first heard someone talking about the Aramaic, what clicked in my brain was, this is physics, this is physiology. I'm a naturopathic physician. This is about how the mind works, how the energy system works. This isn't theology, it's psychology, it's physiology, it's genetics. It's just how the energy system works.
Interesting. So I noticed on
So
your, oh, go ahead. Did
just
you?
one more thought there. So
Sure.
rather than metaphysics, it's all physics. Here's how the energy system works. What the subtle energies were that people weren't aware of, they went, oh, well, that's beyond physical, so that's metaphysical. But actually, there's a continuum called physics. And as we become more and more aware of the subtler energy forces in which we live, move, and have our being, we're now understanding what was called metaphysical, but it really isn't beyond. It's just part of the same continuum, would be my
Yeah.
offering.
Yeah, actually, I would agree with that. It's kind of like the electromagnetic spectrum. At one time they thought, oh yeah, there's radio waves and then there's light waves, and they thought everything was separate. But now they understand all of that is just along the same spectrum. So,
Absolutely. And in that spectrum, one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein is, if you think you are separate or separated from the rest of humanity, you're living in an optical delusion.
I think
And
I'm going to
our
start
brain,
saying that to people.
well, it is so. We have had our minds so structured to believe that you're over there and I'm over here, and once we put that energy into our minds, then our perception, being a product of what's moving in us, inside of us, in the way of energy, our perception reflects what it is that we hold to be true. And it's an optical delusion. It's not true. If we could raise the rate of vibration at which the eye receives, we would see that you and I and everybody in this whole universe are connected. There's only one of us. There is one continuum of energy, and we're all a part of it. But when we were brainwashed, you think about, if you've ever raised a child, you know how many times the child heard nose, eye, ear, hair, you, me. And the child was given information, and the brain produces perceptions to match that. Now, put that in the context of watching a stage hypnotist who stands up there on a stage and says to somebody, puts them in a somnambulistic state of hypnosis, and says, you're not on a stage anymore, you're now on the deck of a ship. Now, normally, we look down with what we call our eye. We take in the light energy bouncing off of the stage. We've got brain cells for stage, and so our brain produces a picture, a perception of a stage. Well, we can interrupt that. It's called hypnosis. When that is interrupted and the hypnotist's voice takes over and drives the perceptual system, then when this person is told they're standing on the deck of a ship, they literally look down and their perceptual system shows them the deck of a ship. They're handed a broomstick. Now, normally light energy bounces off of a broomstick. You and I have brain cells for a broomstick, so we're holding a piece of wood with some straw on the end of it. But if the hypnotist's voice in the state of hypnosis is nothing but the unquestioning acceptance of an idea. So when the hypnotist says, that's a fishing pole, instead of light energy bouncing off of the fishing pole, or pardon me, off of the broomstick, hitting the eye, causing the brain to produce a perceptual image, construct an image of a broom, now the hypnotist voice has taken over that process, and that frequency causes the mind to produce an image of a fishing pole, and this person actually sees a fishing pole in their hand. I mean, actually, their perceptual system shows them that. The masters in the ancient times, they said transcend. They weren't saying float off in space somewhere. They were saying get out of trance, get out of the state of hypnosis. How many times did the child hear? You're over there, I'm over here, separate, eye, ear, nose, body. The whole fact or idea that there's even such a thing as a body is ludicrous in the actual world as it actually exists as an energetic world. But we have this picture in our minds, this perception, and so we believe that our eye is actually looking at what's out there in the world. And the truth is, the eye shows us nothing. Nobody has ever seen anything through their eyes. The eye is an antenna shaped a certain way to receive certain frequencies of light. It's a one-way valve. You can't see out of it. Information comes into it. There's no seeing out of the eyes. When the information hits brain cells fire, and according to the frequency stored within the structure, brain cells fire, and I think I have windows that I see through into the world called my eyes, and that's totally and completely false. That's been proven in brain research. There's actually an interesting video if you go to YouTube, and in YouTube put the name Anil Seth Perception. And this guy's a neuropsychologist, if I remember his profession. And I'm not sure exactly what his actual field is, but basically he works with, as a professional, as a professor, the mind. And he goes through the whole process and says, no light gets into the brain, no sound gets into the brain. The brain, depending on what's resonated in it by the energetic patterns coming through the senses, produces literally the whole world that we see. It's not there the way we see it any more than the fishing pole or the boat is that I'm on the deck of a boat. It isn't there, but I see it. And most people live in a world, literally live in a world that doesn't even exist. If you've ever sat in a courtroom, and listened to 6 people testify about an accident, you wonder if any 2 of them were at the same accident. How is it that their stories are so different? Well, the truth is, no 2 of them experienced the same accident. Yes, they were all in the same space, and the same actuality happened for each of them. But when the energetic experience of the accident hit their senses, each of their brains produced a perception. The guy who's prejudiced against women drivers swears he saw the woman run the red light, when the actuality is it was the man that ran the red light. But he saw what he expected to see, what his state of hypnosis fed him. And that's why we have so much conflict going on in the world, because people literally live in separate worlds and share an actuality that if they correct perception, all of that conflict's going to disappear, because the actuality isn't grounds for conflict, stress, and the insanity that we're seeing going on in the world.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that the word transcend actually means to wake up out of your trance.
Exactly.
I keep remembering back to Gautama the Buddha when he was teaching his disciples, and they would ask him, are you enlightened? Are you a seer? What are you? And he would tell them, I'm awake.
That's it. I'm awake. Go back to Yeshua 2,000 years ago. He says, don't judge by appearances. He's talking about perception. He's talking about these appearances, these images that come to mind that literally, in many cases, have very little or nothing to do with what actually happened in the world. And again, in the key tool, as I say, this is the root of all conflict, and the key tool that we teach is that of forgiveness, which is removal of what never belonged. Once what never belonged has been removed, the reason for conflict is gone.
Excellent.
So how were the laws actually developed, Michael?
Well, again, being careful that the word law doesn't mean a set of rules. There are these eternal forces. How did gravity develop? Well, something laid out this thing called gravity. It's an eternal force. If I learn how to live in harmony with it, I stand on the edge of a cliff and I enjoy the view. If I'm not sure how to live in harmony with it, I might end up at the bottom of the cliff, or my airplane might crash from the sky. So it's simply part of the creation. And when we develop conscious relationship with those eternal forces, we get to harmonize with them. And that's when things tend to move in the right direction and go well. So the more important thing to me is, and that's what our Laws of Living course is about, is coming to the point where we have conscious relationship with these eternal forces, and anything that would block that relationship, we remove and start to step into deeper and deeper relationship with those energetic patterns.
Okay, that's very interesting. So, yeah, basically, they've been around since the beginning and obviously are here to help us evolve, not working against us. And so,
Absolutely. Our best friend.
exactly right, which a lot of people, think, oh, it's victim mentality. The laws are against me. But I was curious in particular what the laws would say about the idea of control, because it seems like this is just a theme that's played over and over again. Governments, people, whatever, trying to control others. It's like, who can control more? So how can we use the laws to get out of this pattern that a lot of people have of wanting to dominate or control what others do?
Well, let's put in the equation, or in our conversation, the corollary of that, and that is those who play the victim role to the authority, and as victims have resentment and hostility toward authority, and wonder why they're being controlled. And so, when people choose to, or pardon me, refuse to be responsible for their lives, they've created a void, and the energetic system will rush in to fill that void and take over their lives for them. And then they'll become resentful. But it's all got to do with personal responsibility. One of the courses that I teach is called Codependence to Interdependence. And in the Codependence to Interdependence workshop, we introduce a concept we call a power person. And a power person dynamic is developed within one's mind when three criteria are met. When these three things happen, one falls into a power person dynamic. And once that's established in the mind, until that dynamic is understood and removed, forgiven, it will literally run that person's life. And my offering is that this is what runs the world. They say money runs the world. Hogwash. Money doesn't run the world. The power person dynamic runs the world. And here's what I mean by that. First of all, let's define the power person dynamic. If someone experiences relationship with someone who has more power over their lives than they do, that's the first checkbox for there's a power person dynamic happening here. The second thing is that person who had the power was not functioning as a human being. That is, they were not functioning as love, which is the essence of a human. The third piece of the puzzle is that the person who did not have the power perceived the circumstance as survival. Once that happens, this person's whole energy field, the person who's the subject of the power person, their energy field opens, and they're like a sponge. They just suck in every energetic dynamic of the environment, and it becomes part of their foundation. Once that power person dynamic is established, for the rest of their lives, there are, until somebody works through that dynamic, there are only three behaviors possible. And I'll just ask our listeners to just think about this and see how this fits in your world. The operative control of one's behavior will come from the level of stress that they're under. And the three behaviors possible are these. When there's no stress, a person will do whatever they did to get along with their power person. So let's say that this person is Mr. Nice Guy or Ms. Nice Guy. Well, that's just the way they operate. No stress, they're rocking Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy. When stress starts to build, if they've not resolved their power person dynamics, then they'll shift into behaviors. There's a thing in the mind in Laws of Living we cover called the automatic decision system. They'll shift into the space where they can only do what it is that they did to resist and survive with their power person. So let's say Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy, their resistance to power person is to become Mr. or Ms. Snarky. So you meet this person, they're Mr. Ms. Nice Guy, wonderful, fun, maybe even marry them and rocking, and you see them and they're just wonderful. But one day, the stress is up and the chips are down. They're starting to move into that high stress position. And all of a sudden they become snarky and you look at them and you go, whoa, wait a minute. Well, who are you? I've never seen you before. What's going on here?
All right, Michael. Well, we need to take a pause on this. So just hold on to that thought for just a moment, because we are going into our break here at the bottom of the hour. We're going to be right back after the break, and you are listening to Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, being simulcast also on Oneness Talk Radio, among others. We will see you on the other side. We are back from the break. If you're just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries. We are coming to you from Truth Frequency Radio, also being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio.
And we are here with Michael Ryce talking about laws of living. And right before the break, we were talking about the power person dynamic and 3 possible behaviors of ways that we respond if we're caught in this personal, this power person dynamic. So Michael, what is the third behavior that somebody would use to respond?
So the third one relates to someone who's ultra stressed. So the first one is when there's no stress, you do what you did to get along. When stress starts to build, second dynamic is you do what you did to resist and survive. And then the third one, when people are ultra stressed, is they will do what their power person did to them that they hated the most. Without control, without choice, when that high level of stress kicks in, they'll just turn and so if the third level for the person we talked about before the intermission was their power person was physically abusive, then this person's going to turn to physical abuse. I remember presenting this, it was probably about 15 years ago. I was in South Florida, and we had been invited by a man who runs a website for alcoholics, one of the largest recovery websites, AA type recovery site. And after I presented that in a workshop, he came up to me and he said, well, Michael, I know that this is really not true. I mean, it sounds good, but it's really not true, because when I was a kid, my father was physically abusive. I got beaten just about every day of my childhood, and I have never laid a hand on my son. And he was kind of in his stuff about, that's just, I've never done that. And he was sort of being hard about it. And, it's like, boom, up against the wall. And then I said, well, okay, I got it. So congratulations on being able to control that behavior. But how much time do you spend still today? And this guy was in his 60s and he'd been in recovery for 30 years. How much time do you spend having to control your fist? And it was just like, he was like, I bowled him over with a 10-ton truck. It was like, yeah, I've been refraining from hitting people all my life, and I never understood it. Well, it's because you haven't resolved that internal dynamic that gets triggered when you become ultra stressed. And again, it's forgiveness that allows us to literally, what forgiveness does is it collapses the perception based on those dynamics so that we can go to the root energy of those dynamics, bring them forward in the presence of active love for dissolution and removal so we're freed from it. Otherwise, literally, my offering is the whole world is controlled by it. I mean, you can predict somebody's behavior. In fact, here's a question you can always ask somebody, and if they're honest, they'll perhaps take your head off. You know, you'll be playing John the Baptist, or they'll share what's going on for them. But almost universally, when you watch somebody under stress and the behavior that they do, wait till things cool down and then ask them the question, how did it feel when your power person did that to you? Most people go into tears. You watch somebody who's normally easy to get along with, nice guy, and all of a sudden they fly into a rage and curse and drag the person who's their object of attention into the dirt. And if you wait till that energy quiets down and you say to them, how did it feel when your power person raged at you and dragged you down into the dirt like that, cursed like that? They'll just shatter, because that's what's operating in their minds, is that third power person dynamic.
So could we say then that anybody who, let's just say it doesn't have a particular person, but they just dislike authority, you know, we have the, you know, the rebellious teen, or they just, any kind of authority, or adults, right, you know, any kind of authority they dislike, are they to some degree dealing with a power person dynamic?
Totally. They had a power person that took authority over them, you know, probably didn't allow them any liberty, any choice, any direction of their own. They were always there controlling them. They were always there running their lives. And, you know, you can't do that. Yes, do this, do that. And so, you know, 20, 30, 50, 80 years later, if that person has not resolved that dynamic, when they're under stress, they're going to lash out and try to control others.
And so for some people, so if our ultimate goal is to heal everything in our lives, for some people who are on a path to healing, wouldn't the stress be something good, because it would bring to the forefront the issue? Because otherwise I could see, you know, if you just have this cush life and you don't really have a lot of outer stresses, you could have this thing bubbling within you, but it never gets a chance to come to the surface. So you went through a whole life and didn't, you know, heal it. And so you're going to have to face it again.
Yeah, there are two sides to that question, or to that issue, as I would see it. And the first one is that I can choose to heal and do my work and do my life simply as a result of choice. And when I understand the principles of healing, I'll do my work and I'll go into myself and clean that up. Most people don't do that. That's kind of rare. Right. So most people, it's, you know, it's like the purpose of pain is to make our ears grow, is to get us to where we'll listen to what's going on, especially what's going on inside of us. And so we'll tend to, under stress and in conflict situations, get to look at those things. One of the things that, you know, in the early days of doing this work, I've been developing this work for almost 50 years now. And there was a time period where I would not go to a violent movie. It's like, why would I want that energy in my field? I'm not going near that stuff. And I've heard lots of people say that. And then one day I had the guidance to go to this really horribly violent film. It's called The Island. And the guidance was there to do it. It's like, I'm not going to that movie. And the guidance was, go. I am not going to that. Go. Go. Okay, I'll go. So I'm sitting in the theater, and the opening scene, or one of the opening scenes, it's in the Bahamas, and somebody crawls up over the back of a boat and graphically has their leg hacked off. It's like, what the hell am I doing here? And what came back was, Michael, You have a belief in bodies and damage and harm. Sit here and breathe and forgive that in you. It's now been surfaced. You can go out and create it in your life, or you can sit here and let that film move in you what needs to be healed and healed. And so now Jeannie and I go to violent movies all the time. And we sit and we breathe. And if you're with me in a film and it's bringing up more than I can handle at any given moment, you'll see me there in the prayer position, balanced energy position, holding a space for myself to move through what's surfacing in me. Because, of course, nobody ever goes into a theater or anywhere else and meets anything other than what they carry in there with them. And you get to clean up and forgive what you need to. And movies can be a powerful way to just breathe and be with what's moving in you rather than having to create it in your life, rather than, taking the obvious and making it manifest so you get to do it in true living color and Dolby sound with somebody else. You can sit in front of that screen, let it come up, clean it up in you, and it makes it a whole lot easier than doing it in the actual world.
So then if you do that when you're in the actual world and, you see violence or, war on TV, like real, or you see something real happening, does it not affect you then? Or how does that relate to, from the screen to the real life when you experience or see something?
Well, there's an interesting film that was out a couple of years ago now. If you haven't seen it, it's very powerful. It's called Hacksaw Ridge. And it's a true story about a man who was, as a kid, there was a lot of violence in his life, and he almost shot his father. And he swore he would never touch a gun again and never do violence again. This is pre-World War II. And the war happens. He's in a small town, and all the young men are going off in their brainwashed state to do war. And he feels like he needs to go, but he won't touch a gun. And he tells his recruiter that he won't touch a gun, but he wants to be a medic and he wants to save lives. Well, he goes into basic training, but recruiters don't always tell the truth if you don't know that. and he's there. Here's your gun. I was like, no, I told them I would not touch a gun. Well, excuse me, son. You're in the Army now. Here's your gun. No, I won't touch a gun. Son, you are going to take basic training and you're going to learn to shoot. No, I'm not. And they court-martialed this guy. And they're getting ready to literally put him in Leavenworth for 20 years because he won't follow orders. He's just willfully disobeying orders. His father was in World War I. And fortunately, his father, and again, true story, knew one of the generals and went to the general and told him what was happening with his son, and that his son was a conscientious objector. And I mean, the brutality that this guy goes through from his trainers and the other guys, the brutality is just sickening. But no matter what they do, he's not going there. And his father talks to this general, and they're just ready to put the hammer on him, put him in prison. And the father comes in with a letter from this general that he served with in World War I, who's now one of the top command, says, this kid's a conscientious objector. We allow conscientious objectors. Put them to work. And they do. And he ends up on Hacksaw Ridge, which is a battle that happened in Japan where his troop is going into battle, and they're watching, they're going down this roadway and they're watching wagon loads of bodies being hauled out. The last platoon was just wiped out, and they're going in to experience more of the same. And they get up on this ridge, and it's just so insane. I mean, the Japanese are dug in. They've got caves and a cave system, and they just can't do anything except get killed. So they call them off the ridge. And this young man who's made a commitment to serve and bring people to healing on command does not leave the ridge, but stays there. Well, all the tough guys, with their bullshit lies about how, no man left behind, all rabbit down the ridge and escape. he stays. And they're down at the bottom of the ridge, all safe and sound, all the tough guys with their guns. And he's up there, and his commitment is to life. And so he starts going through the battlefield. And in the meantime, there's a boat out in the channel, big, cannons, and they're given the order to start blasting. I mean, they turn this ridge into an inferno. And this guy sits and he listens and he says, God, what do you want me to do? And he sits for a minute and there's this inferno going. He says, I don't get it. What do you want me to do? And all of a sudden he hears a groan of an injured man. He's like, oh, okay, I got it. And he goes and gets him and hauls him to the edge of the ridge and lowers him down on a rope. And all these tough guys down below are looking at like, what's going on here? Where is this guy coming from? So he loads this man down, and he loads a second man, and he brings a third and a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, and he's going through this battlefield, a seventh and eighth. And not one of the tough guys down there with their guns went up to help, but he lowered, I believe it was 78 men off the ridge and saved their lives.
Amazing.
He listened, he followed directions, and he lived as an actual human being. That is, as we are designed and created to live as the presence of love. In one case, he's actually in a cave, and there's an injured Japanese man. And this guy freaks out because he knows, this American soldier's going to kill him. He's a medic. He opens his medic kit and treats him.
Huh.
He is the only conscientious objector to ever get the Medal of Honor.
Oh, wow.
Congressional Medal of Honor. Powerful film.
Wow.
Powerful look at what a human being looks like in an insane world.
Very good point. Very good point.
Amazing. Wow.
Now,
One
one thing you brought up a couple of times was forgiveness, and we talked about that quite a bit the last time you were on our show. So how does that fit into the laws of living?
Well, if the energetic forces in which if the energetic forces from which I interact with the world are based in hostility or fear, I can't live as a human being. With this young man, several of the guys, there's one time in particular where he takes this brutal beating from one of the other soldiers. They just make fun of him. You won't pick up a gun. You're not going to have my back. What's wrong with you? You're a coward. No. I mean, they just really rail on him and physically beat the hell out of him. And when his sergeant comes in and wants to know who it was, he's like, oh, no, we're cool. Nothing happened. That's one of the guys he saves and takes off the ridge. And so if we're living out of hostility and fear, you can't do human life. And the only reason someone wouldn't function out of who we are as human beings, and our definition, people say, well, what is a human being? What is this? Well, there are not words big enough to create a definition. However, we have an experiential definition that we use in this work, and that is, have you ever held a newborn baby? Have you ever held a newborn, Patrick?
Definitely. Yeah.
So
our daughter.
Okay, so go back to the first moment you saw that sweet face and held her. If you tapped into her essence, what word would you use to describe her?
Yeah, I would say love.
Innocence.
So if you again, in this moment, just tap into her energy and answer the question, is your daughter loving you, or is your daughter love?
It's a real good question. I mean,
as a newborn.
Yeah.
Well, I would say love, because I don't think newborns know.
Pure being, just pure being, right?
Right.
So that's a human life. That's what we are. Now, most people, that love comes into the world, it gets beat out of them, and they're taught then to go out and find somebody to love them or somebody to love. And they go off looking, you might remember that song title, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Spaces, looking for love in too many faces.
Yeah.
And so we think it's something it's another one of those words, the definition's been changed, and we can't have a culture of love if we don't know what it is. We're setting goals, trying to achieve, oh, I've got to get this from you. I've got to give this to you. No, nobody has ever loved you. Nobody's ever going to love you. You've never loved anyone. Nobody will ever love you. It's what you are. If you now set the mind on a track for living as love, then you've got something that's achievable. However, you're going to get to confront all of your power person dynamics, all of the rage of the genetic system, all of the hatred, all of the fear, all of the sadness, all of the grief, all of the rage, all of the pain, all of the drama, all of the trauma. Forgiveness in Aramaic is a word that describes a tool for removing those energetic patterns from physiology.
So when this comes up for people, the rage, the anger, whatever triggers it, I know you do a lot of breath work. Would you say that that is a tool that people could use to help, solve and cure this power person dynamic that they're in?
Absolutely, 2000%. Let's take a look at another word meaning we've had changed. In Aramaic, there's a term called ruka de kudsha. The Greeks translated it, and it creates this whole crazy world. The Greeks translated those words as the Holy Spirit, like there's some kind of disembodied spirit being somewhere that's supposed to do something for you. In Aramaic, ruka de kudsha speaks of a feminine elemental force that is within us that undoes the effects of our errors and teaches us the truth. Ruka de kudsha. In the Aramaic, where the Greeks translated it and said God sent out his spirit, doesn't say that. In Aramaic, God sent out his ruka de kudsha, his breath. You'll notice when somebody's in trauma, when somebody's in their rage, when somebody's in upset or disturbance, or even the slightest irritation is triggered in them, their breathing pattern alters or stops altogether. There is a veil that's built, a barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind. Actually, it's the artificial unconscious mind that is built by this holding the breath. This veil, this barrier. When they said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain, this wasn't a religious journey. This is just where we live. When they, in the ancient scripture, said the veil of the temple must be rent in twain, they weren't talking about a purple curtain in a church. They were talking about the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind that keeps us functioning out of unconscious power person dynamics. The veil is built by holding the breath. You open the veil by using the breath properly. There's a process we teach called still point breathing. That's a way to use the breath that opens that veil and supports the processing out of all of those untoward energies.
Yeah. So, we've done breath work with you. We've done breath work
It was
also
a long
for
time
many
ago.
years. Yeah. It's been some time, and we've done breath work for years. And it is fascinating. There's this almost this process that almost takes over, where sometimes we describe the breath starts breathing you.
Exactly.
And
That's the
so
sweetness.
yeah, and so it just brings out all this stuff, and the breath and the energy tends to go exactly where it's needed for the healing.
If one is lucky, if one's had a lot of damage done to their energy system, if one gets the breath going deeply enough, they'll move into a space where what the East called Kundalini starts to move. And in the East, they have this theory that Kundalini is an energy that resides in the base of the spine, comes up the spine. That's totally, completely false. At least that would be my offering. That what they call Kundalini is just being restored to a proper full complement and full flow of energy through the system. Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah.
Through the system. And where energy is restricted, when that energy starts to move, it will pound through the blocks. Now, in the East, there's a lot of chauvinism, which means there's a lot of blocked sexual energy. So when one is restored to a proper full complement of energy flow, the first place it often appears is in the base of the spine, because that's where the block is. And so it punches through the block. It can become, when it starts to move, very intense, burning, searing pain, and can move through and restructure the whole physiological system. I remember working with a young man, this goes back about 25 years ago, at our center in Missouri, at Heartland, and he had been injured in playing football, all kinds of injuries. And he started out experiencing, and I forget exactly where it was now, but he started out experiencing this intense burning, searing pain, which is when Kundalini starts to move, what it feels like. And it went to every injury site that he had from his high school and college football days. And when he got up, that pain that had been in his neck for decades, the pain in his big toe, in his right foot, in his left knee, in his left shoulder, in his ribs, that pain that he carried with him all the time was gone. That energy moved as he breathed through his whole structure. And one of the things when we're introducing still point breathing is, and if you get blessed with Kundalini, it's going to be pretty intense. Like, it can be extremely intense, burning, searing pain. But if you're lucky enough to have it happen, be with it and be in willingness, because it will restructure, literally restructure physiology.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I've found that's been happening to me, because since I've been doing breath work for so many years, is that now I don't even have to consciously decide to do breath work. Like, when I need it, it's just like, I just start breathing. I'm
Just
like,
go
oh,
into it. Yeah.
I don't even consciously think. I'm like, oh, I'm breathing. I need to do this. It's really
Exactly.
kind of cool, which is one of the cool benefits, that your body gets used to it. And when you get into that state, your body just knows, and you start breathing. You're like, great, I guess I got to do some breathing. Does that happen to you?
Absolutely. And from the perspective of the Aramaic, now Ruka Dekudsha is fulfilling her role. She's undoing the effects. It's that, again, is the definition of what they call God's spirit. It's the breath, and it undoes the effects of our errors, and literally teaches us the truth, shows us what we need to know. I mean, literally down to the finest detail.
Awesome. So we're winding down here. We're coming up to the end of the show. Do you have just a moment where you could share a poem called Love Restored with us?
I do. Now, let's see. When you say we've got just a moment, what kind of time frame do we have?
We've got about a minute left here.
Oh, okay. Well, it'll take more time than that, so we'll have to save that for next time.
All right. Well, I feel like we just kind of touched on a lot of things here. I feel like there's quite a few areas I like to go into deeper, so we'll definitely have to have you back on to follow up on some of these things.
We'll do that, and if people have more questions, they're always welcome to call my show from 1 till 2 o'clock Eastern Time, Mindshifters Radio. We're on Blog Talk, so they can listen to it through their computers, or the phone number to call into my show is 563-999-3581. And all of our forgiveness work is available free on our website, which is WHYAGAIN, why again, WHYagain.org. So people are welcome to go to the website and find, I don't know, I think we're up to something like 17 or 18,000 pages now on our website. There's just all kinds of material to fill in all the blanks of what we've been talking about. And I'm willing and available to do the show anytime you want to do it. It's delightful to hang out with you guys and have some time.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on again, Michael, and we look forward to having you back. And so we love having everyone with us. And so please join us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page. This has been Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, also being simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. I'm Patrick.
I'm Kathryn. Bye, everyone. And thank you, Michael.
Bye
Blessings. Appreciate it. Have the best year yet of your eternal life.
All right.